The mending station at Gate 9 was not a place anyone stayed longer than they had to. It sat in the northwest corner of the Orvath Narrows border checkpoint, a low room with 3 long work tables, 2 good lamps, a rack of spools, and a sign above the door that read, "Transit Textile Repair" in letters, faded to near nothing. Travelers brought torn luggage straps, split boot seams, frayed cargo netting. I fixed what came in and charged the crossing levy. That was the work. I had been doing it for 11 years. My name is Merin Coss, and I want to be precise about what happened, because people have asked, and I have noticed that the asking tends to get softer and more reverent with every retelling until the plain facts start to slide out from under it. The facts are plain. I am going to keep them that way. She came through on a Thursday in early autumn, in the middle transit queue between the 2 afternoon freight convoys. I didn't see her arrive at the checkpoint. I only saw her when the handling officer brought her down the northwest corridor and stopped in my doorway. He said the Dragon had a wing covering that was peeling at one edge and the crossing supervisor didn't want to log a violation, so could I fix it? I said I could. He left. She stayed. She was young, adult but not long into it, copper and black coloring under the outer layer. You could see it at the joints where the scale skin was thinner and the gray pigment hadn't taken as well. She stood at the center of my workroom and held her wings folded so tight I could see the effort of it in the set of her shoulders. She was thin, not in crisis, not collapsing, but the kind of thin that comes from months of it, the kind you don't fix in one meal. The covering was a fitted panel of woven transit-grade canvas, lacquered gray, pressed and sealed down over the outer face of both wings. Every Dragon transiting through a major checkpoint was required to wear one. The edge seal on her left panel was lifting, maybe 8 centimeters along the trailing edge. I told her I would need to take it down to reseat the edge. She didn't answer. I asked if she understood. She turned her head and looked at me with one gold-brown eye, and then looked away again at the far wall. I took that as yes, and I got to work. The panels came down with a soaking cloth and a flat tool. Slow work, because you do not rush that kind of thing against a living hide. She stood still through the whole of it, which was more than I could have managed in her position. When the left panel came fully free, I set it on the table and reached for my lamp and leaned in to look at the edge seal damage. That was when I saw the marks. Copper and black wing stripe, which I had registered as her base coloring, was not her base coloring. It was the second layer. Beneath the gray transit pigment, beneath the copper and black that must have been an earlier application, there was a pattern. Sovereignty marks, lineage designation, the kind you see on formal registry documents but almost never on a living hide outside of ceremony. Fine as engraving, running the full length of the primary vein in both wings. They had been painted over. Both panels had been applied over paint that had been applied over paint. 3 layers to get to what was underneath. Someone had wanted them gone. Someone had wanted her to look like nothing in particular. I stood there for a long moment. Then I got my solvents and fine cloth and started working back. This was not what the handling officer had asked me to do. He had asked me to reseat an edge seal and send her back to the queue. What I was doing would take considerably longer. I told myself it was because you cannot reseat a seal properly over compromised substrate, and that was true, but not the whole reason. The whole reason was that the marks underneath were careful and deliberate and specific. And painting over careful, deliberate, specific things is the kind of erasure I have never been comfortable with. She watched me work from the corner of her eye the whole time. It took 2 hours. The first layer of gray came off cleanest. The copper and black was deeper set and took more care, and the marks were delicate. I used the smallest cloth I had and shortened my strokes and worked from the inner edge outward so I didn't blur the pattern. By the end of the first hour, she had lowered her wings slightly. Not much, just enough that I could see she had stopped holding herself quite as tight. By the end of the second hour, she had lowered her head. When the last section cleared, I stepped back. I cannot read sovereignty marks the way a dragon archivist can, but I knew what I was looking at was significant. The pattern ran full length in both primaries, fine line copper on black, and where the 2 wings met at the spine, there was a doubled mark I had never seen before, a clasp point designation. A lineage terminus, the last of a line, that means, in the register language, the only one remaining. She turned and looked at the full spread of her own wing. She made a sound I could not describe then and cannot describe now. It was low, and it moved through the floor. The crossing official came back after that, because something had apparently registered on the checkpoint instrumentation, and he came in looking ready to be annoyed, and then stopped in the door and looked at her wings and did not speak for a long time. He asked me what I had done. I told him I had cleaned the substrate before reseating the edge seal. He looked at the marks. He looked at me. He left without saying anything else, which was fine by me. I reseated the edge seals of the panels on the outside of her wings, over the marks but not obscuring them. The panels are transparent at the inner face. It is only the outer lacquer layer that is gray. I had not noticed that before. Possibly I had not looked carefully enough before. When the seals were set, I told her she was done. She did not move toward the corridor. I had 2 more clients waiting. I asked her, gently, if she was ready to continue to the queue. She looked at the door and then back at me, and then at her wings again. I sat down on my stool and picked up the next piece of work in line, which was a split cargo strap, and I started on that while she stood in my workroom and looked at her own marks in the lamplight. She was still there at closing. I locked up around her. I brought her the water tin from under the work table, the one I keep for clients who've been waiting a long time in the corridor heat. She drank from it slowly. I went to get my coat and my bag and turned the lamps down to their night setting and sat in the doorway for a bit because it was cooler there in the evening and I was not in a hurry to go. We sat like that for a while. At dawn the elders came. 3 of them, vast and iron and copper, moving through the Gate 9 corridor like the corridor had been built for exactly this. The night shift handling team stepped back without being asked. I was still in my doorway with my cold tea when they stopped in front of the mending station and looked in. She had her wings out to their full extension. I had not seen that before. They filled my workroom entirely. The eldest of the 3, iron gray, enormous, ridge scales dulled by something I can only call age, the way mountains are aged, looked at the marks for a long time. Then he looked at me. He said something in the sovereignty tongue that the checkpoint's translation unit rendered, with a delay, as the one who put the true mark back when the record said to leave it blank. He said, "We have a name for that." He said her name first, her full sovereignty name, which I am not going to write here because it is hers, and then he said mine. Keth Merin. He said it means the one who sees what the paint was meant to hide, and paints it back. I don't know what I said to that. Something ordinary, probably. Something about edge seals. I am not a person who handles formal recognition especially well. I went back in, and got my bag, and locked the mending station. The 3 elders were still there in the corridor with her, all 4 of them filling the northwest wing of Gate 9, in a way that I suspected was going to complicate the morning queue considerably. I took the long way to the transit stop. There is a window seat on the eastbound shuttle that looks back over the checkpoint roof as you pull away, and I sat in it that morning and watched Gate 9 get small in the distance, and thought about marks. How deliberate they are, how specific, how someone put 3 layers of gray over something careful and exact, and assumed that was the end of it. It's a strange thing, to mend for a living. You spend your whole career watching things come in broken and go out whole. You start to believe that is simply what things do. That wholeness is a direction things tend toward, if you give them enough thread and time and patience. Maybe that's true. I went back to work on Friday,